Richard from Merrimack, New Hampshire says, Craig, I saw you were in the Ken Burns The American Revolution documentary. I examined that. How did you get involved in it? Did you have to up your Scottish accent since you're American now and you only have a hint of one? Well, yeah. How I got involved in it was if you hear from Ken Burns, like if you hear Ken Burns would like you to do a voice in the documentary. I mean, I got a phone call said Ken Burns wants you to do a voice. It's kind of like a summons. You know what I mean? Ken Burns is kind of like I feel like he's an institution. It's kind of like saying, you have to be, it's like jury duty a little bit. He's like, yeah, you better go. Ken Burns wants you. So you go. And they're very nice. And I did some voices in it. I did the voice of John Paul Jones, who was a Scotsman that was the father of the American Navy, as I'm sure you all know because you're Americans, and the Scottish people will know this too. He was a sailor. You want a sailor to be, in charge of the Navy. You don't want to get put in the hands of a computer tech guy. There probably wasn't a lot of them around in 76. But you know what I'm saying. Anyway, he was qualified to do it. How did I get involved? Well, they flat asked me, did I have to dampen down my accent? Now, it's interesting that because I have had Scottish people tell me that I don't have an accent anymore. And that you sound like a Yankee, you sound like Yankee, by the way, in Scotland just means anyone from America. It doesn't mean people from around here in New England. There's plenty of Yankees around here. But Yankee means any American. I think it's from the Second World War when Yankee meant that to the British people. Anyway, the Yanks are coming and all that stuff. Anyway, the little thing there. So Scottish people say, you sound like American. You're Scottish when it suits you. That's another one. Scottish when it suits you. I'm like, wow. Okay, I guess. Or I suppose. It changes. I've noticed that when I'm talking to Scottish people, my kids say this, when I'm talking to Scottish people, I sound much more Scottish. And when I'm talking to American people, I sound much more American. Now, I have a theory about this, which is I like to be understood. So I don't like to repeat myself over and over again. So I've learned, I'm not conscious of doing this, but I have learned probably over the years that if I, adapt my accent sufficiently, then no, and I'm not, again, I swear, I'm not conscious of doing it. I don't think about doing it, but it probably just happens that I end up talking, changing my accent sufficiently so that I don't have to repeat myself and stuff like that. But I still think a lot of Americans would consider me having more than just a hint of an accent. But I don't know. It depends. Also, my job is in large part is to make myself understood. So I think it's important that I make myself understood. Did I have to change my accent when I did the Ken Burns documentary? Do you know, I think I did a little bit. I think I leaned into it a little bit when I was doing the Scottish voices, but I also did some Northern English voices in that documentary as well. So people are talking like that from Game of Thrones type voice and all that. I did voices like that too. So yes, when you're doing voice work, you tend to mess around with your accent. When I was doing the Dragon movies, and I played Gobber in the Dragon movie cartoons, or do we call them cartoons? We might call them animated movies. I can't remember. But when I was doing the Gobber voice, I would talk a lot more Scottish. I was a lot more Scottish like that. But that's not really how people were in Glasgow talk. That's how people in Fife, from the east coast of Scotland, talk. So you mess around with your voice. What I'm saying is you mess around with your voice. You mess around with your voice a little bit when you're using it. So yeah, I did mess around with it.